And when the Republican Party took control of Congress in 2010 after that midterm, when, in the president's memorable words, the Democrats got their shellacking that year, hatred of Obamacare, top of the lungs Republican opposition to every element of Obamacare, that became sort of the main thing that the Republican Party stood for and did in Washington. We actually stopped counting at this show when the Republican-controlled Congress took its 70th, not 17th, 70th vote to repeal Obamacare. They never actually did repeal the law, but they tried to bite off little bits and pieces of it, and they kept repeatedly going back, making sure they could take 70 different votes that they could label repealing Obamacare in order to show off to the Republican base that they really stoked on this issue, that they were doing the absolute most important thing they could do in the country, which is getting rid of that darn health care reform. I mean, that effort on the Republican side has continued. Today, there are 20 Republican-led states that are now suing in federal court to destroy Obamacare, to destroy everything in the Affordable Care Act, to eliminate it entirely. But a funny thing has happened over the past few years. This is the Real Clear Politics polling average, a chart of that polling average that shows the popularity of the Affordable Care Act over time. The red line is opposition to Obamacare. You see they started you see in the bottom axis there, you can see the years. So they started measuring this in 2010. But as you proceed across the graph from left to right, it goes later. It goes 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, up till this current day. So the red line is opposition. The black line represents people who have a favorable view of Obamacare, right? And for years, driven by this rabid Republican opposition, Obamacare was unpopular. But then, hey, look, switcheroo. Now the black line's on top and people like it. Running away with it, actually. And as a factual matter, once the politics on this got a little hazier, it's not hard to see why this is a popular thing. I mean, do you personally know anybody who got health insurance because of Obamacare or because of whatever they called Obamacare in your state? Somebody who didn't have health insurance before but was able to get it because of this law. Do you know anybody who got health insurance that way? Anybody in your family got health insurance that way? Did you get health insurance that way when you didn't have it before? I mean, odds are the answer to one of those questions is yes, because freaking 20 million Americans got health insurance because of Obamacare. 20 million Americans who didn't have health insurance before got it because of the Affordable Care Act. And the Republicans, of course, have been making this out to be the worst thing in the world. Americans getting health insurance? I'd rather die. Right? That's the worst thing in the world. That's the end of America. I mean, but that was basically the deal. A whole lot of Americans who didn't have health insurance would get health insurance, and health insurance policies would actually have to cover stuff that people need. They couldn't be cruddy policies. So it wasn't a radical reconfiguration of healthcare in America. It wasn't a single-payer system. It's not like we all got Medicare insurance. It wasn't like VA care where we all got government-provided care, right? Basically, they did a small-c conservative thing. They made a deal with private companies that provide health insurance that was a compromise. Hey, private companies that do health insurance, you're going to get a lot more customers. That's good for you, but you can't sell them cruddy plans anymore. Here's a whole bunch of stuff you have to cover now. So good for you, a lot more customers, but you have to stop selling the cruddy plans. They have to be good plans now. Okay, so that's good for you, that's bad for you. Also, the government will give people subsidies to help them pay for their health insurance now. So, hey, health insurance companies, you will actually get paid by all these new customers that you're getting because more people will be able to afford to buy these health insurance policies from you. That is good for you. But, on the other hand, compromise, you also now have to cover everyone, including people who have pre-existing conditions. And, of course, health insurance companies do not want to cover people with pre-existing conditions, right? But they give away that because they're going to get more paying customers. So it's a compromise, right? That was the basic deal. From a distance, you strip away all the rhetoric from it. You strip away all the, death panels, death of the republic, this is the end of the world stuff. And you can kind of see this was a small-c conservative plan. This was not a radical thing. This, in fact, started off as a Republican idea for how you might do a Republican market-friendly reform of the private health insurance market. It was a deal with private health insurance companies to get more people covered and to cover people with better plans that didn't kick you off just because you were born with a thyroid condition or you had a lump taken out of your breast or you have diabetes or arthritis or something, right? So it's real health insurance for real people that you can actually use that covers tens of millions more people in this country. Oh, the horror. That's what Republicans decided was the end of the world when Barack Obama was president. That's a big part of how they did so exceedingly well in the 2010 midterms. Well, now we're about to have the next first midterm election following a new president being elected. And now here's the problem for Republicans. Here's the Fox News Channel national poll from this past week. Question 17, quote, I'm going to read you the names of several individuals, items, and groups. Please tell me whether you have a generally favorable or unfavorable opinion of each one. And then this is the list of things they polled on. Again, this is the Fox News Channel poll from this past week. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Republican tax and Trump administration tax reform law from 2017? The answer from the American people, 44% favorable. Okay? Do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the Republican Party? Same answer, 44% favorable. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of President Donald Trump? Again, 44% favorable. Actually not bad for a president, but still, it's 44% approval. Interestingly, the next one they asked about was the Me Too movement. Okay? So it's the Republican tax law, the Republican Party, Donald Trump, the Me Too movement. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the Me Too movement? There, a little more enthusiasm. 48% of Americans have a favorable view of that. Okay, do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the Democratic Party? Yeah, actually, getting up there. Now it's 49% like the Democratic Party. But of all these individuals, items, and groups, what comes in on top? What comes in on top in the Fox News poll for this past week, heading into the midterm elections? Of all of these things, which do you like the most, America? Turns out it's the 2010 healthcare law, also known as Obamacare. Yeah, that one. They actually used the word Obamacare in the question. That one America likes, 53%, more than any of those other things that Fox News is polling on. And I mean, that was their whole list, too. It's not like I cherry-picked the ones that made the point. That was the whole list of things they polled on. The most popular one, the one over 50%, is Obamacare. And I don't know if this is what the Fox News Channel was expecting to find, right, as the most favorably viewed thing they were polling on right ahead of the midterm elections. But there's another big new national poll just out from Kaiser that sort of proves the same point, shows that that Fox News Channel result from this past week may not have been an outlier. So again, this is from this past week. Kaiser polled American voters on a range of issues and said, please tell us which of these issues is very important to you in making your decision on who to vote for Congress this year. At the bottom of the list was foreign policy, then tax cuts and tax reform, then immigration, then gun policy, then the economy and jobs. Usually that's the top. Usually that's what you expect to be the #1 issue in the country heading into almost any election. But this year, nope. By a pretty large margin, more Americans say that health care is very important in making their decision about who to vote for Congress this year. Health care more important than any other issue. And now really drill down, same poll. Americans are asked, okay, just narrow it down. Don't tell us everything that's important to you. Pick the single most important issue that will determine your decision about who you're going to vote for Congress in the important elections this year. What's the single most important issue? And again, by a large margin, the single most important issue Americans say will determine who they will vote for Congress this year is health care. The president, Republicans, and Fox News right now, they're all going nuts on anti-immigrant stuff. Twice as many Americans say they're going to cast their vote in this year's elections based on health care as the number who say they're going to vote based on immigration. Health care, health care, health care. And now here is your autumn miracle for 2018. Yes, Virginia, there is a live and active fight for the future of the country fought by apparently sentient beings. Because I know you're not going to believe this, but given that data that we've got as of this week about how much Americans care about health care right now, how much they actually like what the Democrats did on health care, despite what Republicans promised, right, that they would do to destroy it, given the sort of shockingly large numbers of Americans who say that their vote this year is going to be determined based on who is better for health care more than any other issue, sit down. I don't want to shock you. Grab hold of something sturdy. I am here to tell you that given all of that data, the truly shocking news tonight is that the Democratic Party apparently decided this year that they would campaign on health care. I know. It's crazy, right? It makes so much sense. It's almost impossible to believe. But they are actually doing it. The Wesleyan Media Project has been tracking the content and the quantity of political advertising for the last few election cycles in our country. They just took a national look at how candidates are actually running for election this year in these crucial congressional elections. Again, election night is 2 weeks from tonight. And the results are just clear as a bell. And again, shocking in some ways. In the U.S. Senate races this year, you look at the content of ads that Democratic candidates for Senate are running, 47% of those ads are focused on health care. That's quadruple the amount of time they're spending on jobs or any other issue. In governor's races, same thing. You look at the content of the ads that Democratic candidates for governor are running across the country, they are more about health care than they are about anything else. 45% of the ads run by Democratic candidates for governor are on health care more than any other issue. Now look at races for the U.S. House of Representatives for Congress. There it's even more striking. Fully 61% of the ads that are being run by Democratic candidates for Congress talk about health care. And actually, it's more than that because the Wesleyan Media Project, they additionally broke out ads that were specific to Medicare. Medicare, of course, is a health insurance program. So in addition to the 61% of Democratic ads run by Democratic candidates for Congress, in addition to 61% of those ads being about health care, another 20% are talking about Medicare in particular, which suggests that more than 80% of the ads being run by Democratic candidates for Congress this year are about health care in one way or another. And health care happens to be, by a large margin, the thing that voters most care about heading into this election. Right? Like I said, it's so rational you can hardly believe it. And what the Democrats stand for on health care, what the Democratic Party has done on health care, the American public likes right now. Obamacare used to be unpopular. It's popular now. Right? What Republicans have been screaming about for 8 years now is how much they hate what is now the very popular Affordable Care Act and all of its provisions and how much they can't wait to destroy it. American public doesn't like that idea. And it turns out Democrats are holding them to that heading into election night 2 weeks from now. And so we've got, because of that, a new, weird, and widespread dynamic that you can see unfold right now in real time, even in your home district. No matter who's running in your home district, you are seeing this happen. It's happening among Republican politicians all over the country. Right? I mean, as I mentioned, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, it got 20 million more Americans health insurance coverage who didn't have it before. That's a popular thing, right? It's better to have health insurance than not. But the single most popular element of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is this thing about pre-existing conditions, right? This critical part of the deal that was struck to pass Obamacare, where it became a new rule for health insurance companies that they can no longer deny you coverage and they can no longer charge you extra for your coverage just because you have a pre-existing condition. That is a very popular provision of the law. That gets rid of what was a huge and devastating and sometimes fatal flaw in what used to be the American healthcare system before Obamacare reformed it and achieved this deal. That pre-existing conditions thing is also infinitely relatable. Everybody knows someone who has a pre-existing condition of some kind if you don't have one yourself. Senator Claire McCaskill, up for re-election this year in Missouri. When she does town halls in Missouri as part of her re-election campaign, she asks people to stand up if they have a pre-existing condition so they understand what's at stake if the Republicans finally follow through on what they're trying to do to get rid of Obamacare. She asks people to stand up if they have a pre-existing condition or if they know somebody who does. This is a shot of one of those Claire McCaskill town halls after she asked that question. Stand up if you've got a pre-existing condition or you know somebody who does. Everybody stands up. And that's a snapshot about how it's working in that campaign, but that's true in your personal life. That's true across the country. In that Kaiser poll from this past week showing how important healthcare is to people making their decisions about who to vote for in this year's election, they polled specifically on that part of Obamacare, the pre-existing conditions part, the part that says your healthcare insurance has to cover pre-existing conditions, has to cover you even if you have a pre-existing condition, can't charge you more just because you have a pre-existing condition. By a 3-to-1 margin, Americans are in favor of that. It's got a 75% approval rating. Americans love that. Well, the basic bill that House Republicans voted on a gazillion times to kill Obamacare, it explicitly states that the pre-existing conditions guarantee would be ended if Republicans got that passed. That lawsuit by 20 Republican-led states that's pending in the courts right now to eliminate all of Obamacare, it also explicitly and specifically seeks to remove the protections for people who have pre-existing conditions. Republicans are desperately trying, both in Congress and in the states and through the courts, to kill coverage for pre-existing conditions. That's what they're actively working on. Don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. This is what they're doing. And they used to think this was great politics. It's clear that it's not great politics anymore. The electorate is now absolutely opposed to them on this and really cares about health care as an issue heading into this election. So now there's this weird thing happening in hotly contested races all across the country where Republicans who've been inveighing against the evils of Obamacare for years, who've been voting to kill Obamacare for years, who've been supporting these efforts, actively supporting efforts now to get rid of pre-existing coverage, pre-existing conditions coverage specifically. All these Republicans, on the occasion of this election 2 weeks from tonight, all these Republicans are now pretending, actually on this issue, I'm kind of a Democrat. All these Republicans are now trying to run on the Democratic Party's position on health care. They're all running against themselves.
In Wisconsin, pre-existing conditions are covered. And as long as I'm governor, they always will be.
Actually, under Governor Scott Walker, Wisconsin is the lead named plaintiff on the federal lawsuit that would eliminate Obamacare, including specifically its protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But nice try.
I'm Josh Hawley. I support forcing insurance companies to cover all pre-existing conditions.
Actually, Josh Hawley is the Attorney General in the state of Missouri who's personally handling that state's part in the federal lawsuit to kill Obamacare, including its protections for pre-existing conditions. But again, nice try.
I support forcing insurance companies to cover pre-existing conditions.
Actually, under Florida Governor Rick Scott, his state is suing to allow insurance companies specifically to no longer cover pre-existing conditions. But nice try.
I'm fighting to protect pre-existing conditions.
Here's the truth. Kevin Cramer voted for guaranteed coverage for pre-existing conditions.
I'm taking on both parties and fighting for those with pre-existing conditions.
Everyone agrees we're going to protect pre-existing conditions.
I want the voters to know I'm committed to protecting people with pre-existing conditions. I'm fighting for it, I fought for it, and I voted for it.
Nope. Martha McSally, no, you did not. You actually voted to get rid of Obamacare, including its protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So did you, Ted Cruz, Texas senator up for re-election. So did you, Dean Heller, Nevada senator up for re-election. So did you, Dana Rohrabacher, Russian congressman up for re-election. So did you, Congressman Kevin Cramer, running for Senate now against Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. You all voted to end insurance coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. You all voted for it. You all voted to kill Obamacare, including that provision of it. And now you've all pulled on these latex masks just in time for Halloween to pretend like, actually, you're kind of a Democrat on this issue, and people should vote for you if they want to save Obamacare, despite your voting record, your uninterrupted voting record, and your uninterrupted prior political resume of trying to kill it. This is happening all over the country. Democrats are running on health care. Republicans are pretending to be Democrats running on health care, completely denying their old voting records and what they are actively doing right now on the subject. And to put a cherry on top of this Sunday, this week, 2 weeks out from the election, the Trump administration has just announced that they are imposing new rules on the states. That for the first time since Obamacare passed, they will allow health insurance companies to once again start refusing to cover people with pre-existing conditions. States will now be able to have health insurance coverage once again, like we used to have, that doesn't cover people with pre-existing conditions or that charges them more because you've got a pre-existing condition. New rule just issued by the Trump administration yesterday. They literally picked the issue that more Americans care about than any other heading into this election. And on that issue, they did the exact and specific opposite of what the American people want on this issue. And this issue proves to be more motivating than any other for how people are going to vote in 2 weeks' time.